Hello, chess friends. This is International Master Valeri, and welcome to today's lecture on YouTube. So, what we're going to be talking today is quite interesting. I'm going to introduce you to an opening that you could basically use against everything, against each and every one of the lines that people tend to play. And I'd like to show you how that is such a good idea to play and what you can do with it. I'm talking about the London system. Basically, the London system has the following specifics. It starts with d4, and against pretty much anything, but more specifically when black plays d5, white's plan is to go out with knight f3, set the dark square bishop up to the f4, and control the square of e5. And that's really what all that white actually wants to do. Now, what's also very important about this is that besides the control of the e5 square, white is going to build up an incredible attack on the king side. That's what you'd like to be doing. So this is a very good idea. d4, knight f3, bishop f4, steady control or command in the middle, and the chance to build up around the king side. Now, what about black? Now, since this lecture is more of an introduction to this opening, what I want to show you are a couple of the different things that people can do to you. And so you know what, or you will know exactly what to expect. So first of all, what people will do or can try to do is going to be d6, d5. Now, this is the easiest way to get our idea of what we can expect of this line. What happens or what goes if black plays d5? If black plays with the move of pawn to d5, our plan is that we do knight f3. And in case of knight f6, we do bishop f4. Now, this is important because of the key goal that makes all the different tactics by white possible. And this is actually the ability to control the e5 square. If you don't have the e5 square, or in any case or occasion you happen to lose it, you lose your control. It's a really important thing that you try not to lose or give away that control. So you place that bishop on f4 and you take that up. Now, what do we do next? Well, after we have the bishop on the f4, it's about developing the rest of the pieces around the center. That's right, you heard me. It's around the center. That means we can't necessarily succeed or immediately get anything within the center, but we're going to build around it until we're finally ready to do more. So after e6, white will play knight d2. Now black is going to, if he plays bishop to d6, I've seen this happen. I'd recommend that you just play alongside e3 and you don't bother. Or maybe you could even play bishop to the g3. Point being is that if it changes, you can take back. You get the H file opened, and then you can have moves like e3 and bishop d3, or even g4 at sometimes if black chooses to cancel short. So that's really not going to work for him. Now, I would say that actually if we play with the move of bishop to the g3, then position is going to be great. If we can play e3, of course, as well. So if he exchanges, we take back, and then we get the bishop on the d3. It's pretty good. It's really all right. If he comes up with a move like c5, we can do c3. Now, what if black plays standard? Standard means bishop e7, castles, and c5. And now we get to what I'd call the main specific of this opening. It is the pawn pyramid that we've gotten. It is the ability to control or hover around the e5 square. And more importantly, the chance for us to build instantly towards the king side. So actually, that's what we're looking to do. You want to build around the king side, and you'd love to get the attack going. Now, the great thing is that there is very little that black can do about that. So, for instance, if people play supposedly knight to c6, you're great, because then you can continue with the move of knight e5, which I find excellent. And so in case black does bishop to the d7, oops, you'll never do that. And that is too important to give away. You can do queen f3. The point is that this knight is going to help you to transfer your queen through the f3. And while the bishop on f4, as well as the pawn, guarantee the e5 square, the other bishop and the knight guarantee the second most important square, that happens to be e4. So black can jump ahead. That is a great starting point. We begin this way knowing that things are going to work. Now, what's next? Well, actually, what you find out in this position is that, as soon as white's gotten that knight, the square of e4 under control, and the rest of the pieces coming down to advance, there is going to be more. You can imagine that. Playing after rook e8, white can do queen f3. And now, just to see that I'm not actually thinking this up, I'm going to follow some book moves. You could see queen h3 attacking h6 here. I mean, okay, this is not by the book. Okay, by the book, what does book suggest black should do? h6. And then we can have, even a move like g4 happening. Now, yeah, I want you to be careful about playing that type of move, but you want to consider it. So basically, bishop takes h6 is also possible. Basically speaking, this is what the line is about. But of course, there are different ways on how black can attack it. One of them is c5. Then he can do knight c6 and bishop to the d6. This time, when we go ahead with that idea of knight e5, black will prepare to at least put a challenge against it. And the beauty of the line is that white can play f4. This is called the stone wall attack. But what's great about it is that the dark square bishop, instead of being on c1, that's usually quite passive and rather irrelevant, it stands on a very, very good position. It stands at g3. And you can now see that it's much more than just a good-looking square for the bishop. We have that bishop ready to go at the square of h4 fairly quick. And not only that, we're also going to have that possibility to attack the black knight, as well as the ability to move the queen around, castle, get the queen on h3, attack h7, and really set up much of the battle instantly against the black king. Interestingly enough, black could fight that by moving his knight around, but that cannot help him too much, simply because white's pawn structure remains very solid. So that castling, g4, even moves like king h1 and so on, are actually very natural and pretty strong as everything goes. Going back down, what are the other options that black has in this line? Well, not in this line, but let's talk about what goes if black plays knight f6. You would definitely experience people who go against you with a move like e6, and then you can continue with a move like bishop to the f4. But then after bishop to the f4, c5, you can do e3, d5, and c3. So now take a look. We follow the same structure with the transposition is the same. Now, naturally, black can try to be flexible and play this move. Now, I need to tell you something key. If black has actually kept the opportunity for a move of pawn up to the d6, you need to make sure that you get that light square for your bishop, so that then you can build around it, and then you can get your play going really well. Bishop d3 and knight e5 is still going to work. Even in case of a move like b6, we could still do the same. Bishop d3, castles, knight e5, and so on. If black ever tries to do a move of d6, the thing is that the most important of white's development here is that he can bring out most of his pieces behind the pawns. And you can now see that with those e4 and d4 perfectly lined up and prepared in that way, you don't have anything to be worried about. That's why it's so good. Now, that is easy. But what if black doesn't allow that type of attack? So we basically say that in case of d5, we fight for the e5 square, developing and moving around so we can play knight e5. And in case of d6, we play towards e4. All right, then what if black plays g6 nevertheless? Well, if black plays with the g6, we can do bishop f4, bishop g7, then we do knight bd2, castles, and e4 or e3. e3 is a more of a standard London system because in here we don't want to allow black to attack us. If we play e4, he might do d5 at some point or c5, and that dark square bishop is really open and ready. So in here, we would prefer to keep our pawn chains as they are so that everything stands. in line and opposition against his bishop. That gives you an opportunity to develop very safely and keep black behind. E5, of course, is now attacked 3 times, so that will cause a problem if he tries to push it, although it could be possible and sometimes a sacrifice and try to find some initiative. But overall, you don't have to worry. You can even play bishop c4, which as a result will give you will provoke black to do d5. That gives you the e5 square in control. I personally think that many people will simply do knight bd7 and they'll play this as a king's Indian. Now, something really important about that structure is to know that when people treat that as king's Indian, it really doesn't work all that well. Why? Well, it's for a number of reasons, really. I think the most important of them is the fact that, first of all, when black plays e5, it looks like this pawn can go to e4 and give him a lot. But the truth is that it can. And it is because white's knight is now going to maneuver towards the queen side. He's going to go to c2. He's going to play c4 and really build around the queen side. More importantly, the Darshku bishop is incredibly useful, not only applying pressure versus both d6 and c7, but also serving to protect the king side and keeping many of the black pieces away so that he can't advance too well. Black plays rook e8. We've got knight c2, knight f8, and possibly c4. If you look more carefully, more closely to that, you actually find out and you discover that white's pieces are simply moving forward. They may not have a target or attack against the black king, but they certainly do have what I would call a specific line to pressure. We can do b4, knight b3, rook c1, queen d2, even rook d1 plus c5 or d5 to build around. The Darshku bishop also serves pretty well. What about black? Well, I wouldn't say that knight h5 is possible because we could take it. So you could see it would take a lot more regrouping than white so that he could even start or begin with the attack. So that's the idea. We can find out that if black plays along with knight d7, white can probably even maneuver the knight on b5, b1, and we certainly have quite a bit of time. So we can set out the knight up to c3, and then of course we've got the knight at d5, which is beautiful. And so now black can do knight f6, and then we've got queen to the d2, c6, and possibly the move of b4. So this is a great way to play it. Now remember one of the biggest things about this opening. Now you're probably wondering, what is it? Well, the first thing is the amount of forces that we set instantly on the queen side. And then the second is the fact that white is going to play for c5. That's right, not b5, it is c5. It is essential that the Darshku bishop is kept open on that line so that we don't allow any moves of the kind like rook b8 or similar. That is going to give you the chance to push up. And now we see the perspective of that knight. That's why white wasn't worried about it retreating, because now it can go to b4 and attack. If you want to learn a lot more about this opening, I do recommend you to actually check out the course on London system that's being offered at a 60% discount. It's a 13-hour course that covers this opening in a great detail. I've also made another webinar. If you search on YouTube for it, you're going to see it was another webinar I made last year on this opening. Covers in a lot more detail. Now let's talk about the deviations, because people don't follow theory. Let's say people will play c5. I mean, we can't have London system now, can we? Well, no. Not at least in the exact way as you want to play. The good thing is you can play c3. If you do a move of c3, people will eventually go d5, and likely what's going to happen is that there will be a transposition. This opening abounds with transpositions. There's so much more. If black plays c6 to the d4, however, we can continue with the move of c6 to d4. There's going to be the control of the e5 square, and now white can develop naturally. I want to mention something. There are two different types of plans here. If black ever goes on with c6 to the d4, g6, or anything that doesn't allow white to attack on the king side, it's always about the queen side. The bishop, as well as the pieces coming together and opening up, really help out with that. However, if black doesn't play with g6, but rather goes with moves like e6 and bishop e7, similar tactics, then we would actually follow up and love to advance or target the black king side. These are the most important things that we'd like to do. And you'd always want to think about it this way. Keep the idea of pressure on either the king side or the queen side, depending how the opponent goes. And I mean, let's go a little bit in more detail because this transposes in almost the Slav. This is called actually the exchange Slav transposition. But I love that because then after bishop e2, and let's suppose a move of pawn up to the e6, we don't have to worry about anything. Now, white can simply castle on the short side area, and then as soon as this is done, the rest of white's pieces are actually moving on the queen side. So this is going to be great. Imagine black plays bishop to the d6. And, right now, we have to play with the move of bishop takes to the d6. Then there's queen takes to the d6, and then rook to the c1. When it's getting ready, he's going to be moving forward with moves like a3 plus pawn up to the b4. And that's perfect. Step by step. This is all that white actually wishes to do now. Now, I would like to say that, as an idea, black could think of castling. And he's not having anything terrible to worry about. But remember, the plan is not to kill him from the beginning. It is much more about just taking the time and building up a position that's strong enough and controlling. White can do queen d2. There is like a3. There is b4. There's going to be knight c5. And there's so much more to bring. So these are some of the main suggestions that I basically have so that you could follow this opening successfully. So in summary, I'd like to mention to you 3 key ideas as a part of the introduction. The first idea is, if people play d5, remember to focus on the e5 square. Everything is about the center and your opportunity to use that center as well as your development to help kingside. The key beats are the move of knight d2 plus bishop to the d3, which are essential to help you control the center, and then the opportunity to play with c3 and get a fantastic pawn chain. You can then follow it up in different ways versus the black king. If people choose the Nimzo approach against you with e6, then you don't need to worry. The fact that black hasn't played d5 is quite fine, because the drawback of that plan is that if he doesn't transpose and plays b6 instead, you can still go for the center command. You just bring your pieces around and you focus on playing e4 when you're ready. And finally, we have the King's Indian. The King's Indian approach is about black keeping his king side protected and giving us another type of idea. Either we're actually going to develop our own forces and focus on just continuing and probably improving with short castles, rook e1, knight c4, and so on. Or if he actually picks up to play the move of queen e8 and builds up around the e5 move, we're fine. Because what this is going to give white is a chance to build on queen side. The dark square bishop is always going to be missing the play there. And even though it looks like he may have a more important target, our king is never that weak. So we could actually focus and rely on advancing, gaining more space, and having a lot more pressure and command towards the queen side area. This is basically all you need to know. Now, what happens if people deviate, playing Dutch defense, c5, or whatever? Well, more or less try to follow the main ideas or the key order. We develop, we set everything around the center, and we actually consider one of the 3 areas to play on. Is kingside possible? Not right now. Is center a good idea? Absolutely. We've got a lot of power. See, if people play with something like c5, we've got the other order. We could actually consider playing with c3. And then again, it's either the center or the queen side. You must define which side of the board you choose exactly based on how your opponent is going. and whether he actually picks up to play on the king side, queen side, or the center with his development, you can respond in the right way by confronting him on the opposite. Now, let me answer a couple questions that actually you guys have asked, and this is may you explain what is the principle of opening? Well, I guess this is a confusing question because I'm not sure if you're asking of the principle of opening or the principle of disopening. The principle of opening, I mean, there are many principles, but the key is try to develop fast and active. I guess these are two principles, but really, if they connect, you must develop fast. This means making sure that every piece goes once out without any delay. So once, and second, you must develop actively. That means your key idea is to bring them out as advanced as possible, usually closer or towards the center. This is important. Now, key point, when it comes down to the London system, it is particularly these two squares that you want to pay attention for. If you keep them on command, everything's going to be fine. So develop around that. Do you know when I attack a defendant chess? Well, that depends on the position. There is no way to say. Usually you want to be attacking and defend only when it's necessary. Defense is always a bit of a disadvantage. Now, how do masters calculate? That has nothing to do with the topic, but usually the way they calculate is through the opponent's perspective. Remember, you're always going to see your moves, more or less, but we often tend to forget what the opponent can do. So my major advice for you is look and try to calculate from the opponent's perspective. This is key. All right. Now, as one of you actually criticized, that's good. I like criticism. He's put much more effort in this and more knowledge than the last 80/20 Dragon Tactics did. Well, it was a different structure. I would understand if some people were unhappy because of the structure. This is basically the structure that the whole project is about. It covers a bunch of master games that revolve around a combination of ideas that happen again and again in different ways. So the games are rather fast covered. They're actually, I've made sure that I cover all the key points in detail, but this is not necessarily like your typical um, you know, opening tutorial. This is very different. So the whole structure is different. It's based on number of ideas that happen again and again in a lot of games. So I'm basically going through a lot of games where you see the same idea, and the point is that you have that aha moment where you say, oh, okay, so this idea happened here. It happened in the game like 5 before, or happened in 3 games before. So you see the structure is quite different. Now, one of you asked, I use Chessbook in a computer, so can you give can you give a recommendation? First, study the main lines. Then you can go to the sidelines and therefore, continue. Because if you don't know the main line, if you go to the sidelines, you're going to get confused. If you know the main line, you're going to know where each side is going with the main lines, especially for your opponent. And then you'll be able to see why the deviations are played, why they don't work usually, or how they're possibly inferior. Now, one of you asked, how to play positional like Karpov? Well, that's a great question. But, positionally is what we usually play. It's like asking, are people good? Yes, they are. Generally everybody plays positionally. It's just mastering the qualities that make you great at positional play is what Karpov has. Usually takes a lot of years of practice, as you probably know, but that's the more general question. The more important thing is techniques. Learn techniques, and then you get better at that. Techniques like improving your pieces, finding the right area to plan or attack, knowing when to exchange, and how to think about pawn structures. This is also covered in the course by Grandmaster Ron Hanley, a 13-hour course. It covers a lot of the strategy of this opening and in general, something that you have to know. He covers pawn structures greatly. So check it out. It's only available for a few hours tops. And I love the dragon? Question mark. Yeah, well, very different than this opening, but you have to know, Dragon is a great opening if you are willing to put the effort to learn it, because it has a lot of typical ideas that are really not that easy. In any case, I would actually appreciate and love if you send out any of your feedback, comments, questions, or maybe even some of your games with queries to my email, which is basically valeri.lilov@gmail.com. Or you could actually even visit my website, which is tigerlilov.com, and just leave a message if it's easier for you. I really look forward to hearing from you. And if there is anything that you would like me to cover or send out, um, I would love to bring you my input or suggestions. Thank you all for joining, and I'll speak to you in a couple weeks.